have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. You all know who I am. Robert Whitelaw, the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California. Today, we are going to spend some time talking with Matt Theriault, an accomplished real estate investor who's going to share some of his secrets with us. But before we do, let's give Matt a chance to introduce himself to us. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Robert. Glad to be here.
So give us a little bit of I've obviously read your background. I'm not coming from zero here, but for the benefit of the folks listening, give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. Yeah, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent the next 15 years or so of my life in the music business and did really well for myself and had a small little hip-hop label with major label distribution, and it just seemed like nothing was ever going to get in my way, and I was set for life, and it was just a great living, had a great existence. And one day, this little thing called the digital download came along and basically turned that whole industry completely upside down in a very short period of time. And I found myself probably within 6 months of Napster really hitting the scene and hitting it hard. Within 6 months, I was bankrupt, broke, divorced, and bagging groceries.
Wow.
So that was... talk about having the rug pulled out from under you. And it was a very humbling experience. I was very angry, very bitter. I bagged groceries for about 6 months doing this intense soul-searching journey, or embarked on this journey. And, I just blamed everybody and everything. And it was just, it was a really tough time. And it kind of hit a point where, wow, I guess this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my life unless I do something about it. No one was coming along to save me. No one was coming along to, be my hero.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of shoulders to cry on and no shortage of sympathy and empathy, but that wasn't really making a difference in my results. So the most unlikely person of all was the grocery store manager, who was 34 years old, coincidentally the same age as me. He was the manager. I was bagging groceries. And just because we were the same age, we had some stuff in common. We started talking, and he said, Matt, if you want your life back, if you really want to get that lifestyle back, I'll tell you, real estate, it's the final frontier where the average person has a legitimate shot at creating real wealth. And I was like, well, okay, that's all I needed, because I had no idea what I was going to do. So,
you could have read a bumper sticker and gotten that, man.
I know it. And that's what it kind of felt like. But at that point in my life, I just needed someone to point me in a direction, so I didn't know what to do. And that night,
from that standpoint, Matt, what do you think? Do you think it was the actual words, or do you think it was more of a you need to own your own future kind of thing? Because it sounds like you were blaming most folks aside from yourself for what your situation was. What part do you think that played in kind of the turning point for you?
Yeah, there's kind of two stories in there. One part was, I got that quote from him, or those words of advice from him after a very pivotal moment at that grocery store. I was, they were shorthanded that day, so I didn't have to bag that day. I got to actually be a checker, so I was promoted during my shift with no pay increase, but I did, my responsibilities increased. And I was just there, I was bagging groceries, and it was a really busy day. And I remember there was this one lady came through, kind of like if you were to envision your typical soccer mom in a very affluent area, she had on that warm-up outfit that was probably, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. She had her hair perfect, her nails were perfect. She was on the cell phone, and she had 2 kids in the $1,000 baby stroller, and she was paying me no mind while she was on the phone. So I finished checking her groceries, and I told her whatever the balance was, and so she gave me like the little finger, like 1 minute, and opened up her wallet and handed me her card. And as she handed me her card, her little ATM receipt fell out of her wallet, and I couldn't help but sneak a peek at the balance. And I remember she had $256,000 in that account. And I was thinking, like, wow, it's been about 9 months, almost 10 months since I've seen something like that in my bank account. And doing what I'm doing right now, I'm never going to see it again. And that was the big moment. And I had to just dismiss myself. I took a break. I went out to the car in the parking lot and just, I had a moment where I cried, and I was like, there's got to be something better for me. And all of a sudden I got real religious and started looking up to God. And I said, someone please give me a sign. And, I walked back in, and the manager thought that he had noticed that I was certainly disheveled and upset. And that's when we had that conversation. That's when he gave me those words of advice. And I just came to the realization, wow, if it's very cliche words. If it's to be, it's up to me, right? And after 6 months of nobody coming and helping me and nobody saving me, I was like, okay, I got to do it. So that was those two things kind of happened simultaneously.
Well, you know, the funny thing about cliches, Matt, they're cliches for a reason.
Right?
They don't tend to be cliches because people wish that they were true. They tend to be cliches because they are kind of true. So good for you for spotting it, though. I mean, so many people kind of glide right by those important moments in their life where they can kind of look inside as well as outside and see that it's time to make a big change. Now, once you got to that point, what happened with you from there? What was your first steps towards reacting to that realization?
Got it. Okay, so as soon as my shift was over, I punched out. The logical thing was to grab a bottle of wine and go home. That's exactly what I did. But I went home and it was just me and the computer and this glass of wine. I just started searching everything real estate.
Okay. And as a Marine, I'm going to let you decide whether or not you want to edit the wine part out for the interview.
Oh, no, that's me.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's me. And so I just started Googling everything and searching everything real estate and came across, I mean, it was just such a weird, it's a weird circumstance, a weird situation, serendipitous, I guess you would say, is came across an aunt of mine that I hadn't talked to in probably 15 years. And she happened to be the number one real estate agent in just like 2 cities over. And she had been number one there for like 26 years. And I just went through her website, saw all of her accolades. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So the bottle of wine is gone. And I had a little bit more courage than I did when I started searching. And I sent her an email and asked her if she wanted to have lunch the next day. And first thing in the morning, there was an email in my inbox, a reply. And she said yes. And I had lunch with her. And I would say within 24 hours, I was enrolled to get my real estate license.
So that's kind of where you, I guess, how do you want to say it, earned your chops, was starting off as a real estate agent. Yeah,
I did. And I did pretty well. I went in and she gave me a small little loan to help me stay on my feet. And because she said, this is a tough business and it's going to take you 6 months before you get your first deal. So let me help you out. And so she gave me a few bucks and it wasn't a lot. But I went in and she told me exactly what to do. And I held an open house and actually sold a house on the very first day I was holding an open house.
Excellent.
So, yeah, it was great. So I gave her all of her money back right away and just took off with that. I got Rookie of the Year, did really well. And each year was progressively better. And then I moved into a higher, more affluent neighborhood, which I had to work a lot less to make the same amount of money. So that was fun.
Right.
And, right at the end of those, that was about a 4-year run. And right at the end of those 4 years, I had that one of those superstar clients that all real estate agents dream about, the kind that just fax them listings and fax them purchase agreements to say, hey, process the paperwork. Right.
Right.
And so I had one of those clients and it was an investor and I was helping him buy property and flip his property. And he probably did 2 or 3 of those a month. And boy, that was a fantastic living.
What area was this in?
This was in Palos Verdes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And, there, one deal is a $30,000 commission. And so you do 3 of those a month, you do the math. It was it was a very good year. But there was a time where it was one Saturday, we had a meeting to get together at the office and I was all dressed up. I had my suit and tie on. It was like 10:30 and they didn't show up till 11. My clients, they show up in jeans and a t-shirt and, they sign paperwork for about 10 minutes and then they're off to enjoy their weekend. And I got to hold their houses open and coordinate other agents to hold the other houses open. And I was like, you know what? If this is where the money's at, I just felt like I was sitting on the wrong side of the desk. So I got to see what they were making. And even though I was doing very well for myself, I really wanted to do what they were doing. That's what my real aspirations were. And so I went and made a large investment in a real estate investing program. And I would say within 6 months after that, I had stopped representing other people and started representing myself on my own buys and sells.
And that's a big one, right? Because when I get folks asking me, how do you become an investor? I oftentimes have to say, you know what? I may not be the guy to ask because I've been since 1988. I have steered clients to excellent investments. I've watched people do really, really well, but I've been the equivalent of the maid who has a messy house, right? I'm great at keeping other people's stuff together and getting their deals going, but then I wasn't doing it in my own life. So I've started doing that, but I'm obviously a little bit further along in terms of age than you are. So I'm unfortunately starting the journey later. But I think that's a huge moment for folks who've decided to move forward in the world of real estate, and if they've taken the path of becoming an agent first, making that transition from realizing I can either continue to work as I'm working and do well, or I can do it differently, emulate the investors I'm working with, and in exchange, I continue to be able to earn excellent money, but also buy myself more freedom. More of my time is mine. Does that kind of fall in line with your experience?
Yeah. You mean when you're saying buying more time is yours as a real? I
mean, in terms of investors I've worked with, I find that what they're doing in each moment the thing that they need to do for their own pushing forward, as opposed to working on someone else's timetable, really. And then when they want to take that time to go off and do other things, their investments are continuing to work for them and make them money. Whereas as a real estate person, if you're not there getting signatures and closing escrows, that money stops. Right.
Yeah.
So you're creating a flow that exists. If you stop at a certain point, you may not be acquiring new things that generate cash flow, but you still hold things that generate cash flow. So even while you're sleeping, that cash flow is happening.
Exactly. Yeah, I just had enough days of, having to cut the family gathering short because someone wanted to buy a house, and going to parties and stuff like that. And I just knew if I didn't drop everything I was doing, they were going to buy it from someone else. And I just kind of hated being at the mercy of other people like that.
Yeah. Now, what would you call your breakthrough first deal?
It was the very first deal, really. I went to this school. I had a new mentor around investing, and his advice was, "Hey, drive up and down the streets and look for dilapidated houses." And so I was like, "Okay, I'll do that." And just came back and said I found one, and this was in Long Beach, California, and Newport Avenue, right downtown. And it was this house that looked like it had been started to be rehabbed, but then it looked like it had been abandoned, like somebody ran out of money or something. And it was just sitting there. And I went and told him all about it. He says, "Well, go put it under contract." And I was like, "Well, I don't have the money to get it." He said, "That doesn't matter. Go put it under contract. Do that part first, and I'll tell you what to do next." So I went in and I got it under contract. And I was like, "Okay, now what, boss?" And he said, "Now go find the money." And he kind of walked me through how to find the money and just kind of demonstrated how much easier it is. This was the real breakthrough, was how much easier it is to find the money for a deal once you have the deal than
Absolutely.
It is the money before you have the deal. And that was probably the big breakthrough. And I was like, oh, so really all the value in this business is finding deals. So if you can find deals, there's no limit or end of money out there waiting to participate with you, because that's what you do, finding deals. That's the hard part. That actually has the most value to that relationship.
Absolutely. And so many people don't get that. They don't get that. I mean, whether we're talking about people who've sort of embraced the world of wholesaling or finding the deals, getting it into contract and then assigning it or whatever they're doing, just the fact you've gotten the deal to a point where we have a written agreement that just describes how this is going to end up.
Yep.
There's a whole class of folks that invest that love working with those kinds of people. So you're really bringing a huge level of value to the equation too.
Yep.
And in terms of advice, at this stage in your career, if you were looking back and there was someone who was maybe not quite in the same situation you were, where you were making $7 an hour, but maybe just in the grind, they're doing the full-time job and it's comfortable enough that they can pay the bills. What do you say to them for the first step to try to liberate themselves from what they're doing into what they'd love to be doing?
I think, getting a basic foundation of education of the concept of, how a real estate transaction works, and then how you can make money off of that transaction. There's multiple acquisition strategies, but really just a few different exit strategies. So getting just a grasp on that. And I think being very intentional about creating your environment, and specifically starting with the people that you start to associate with. I think finding somebody that's successful doing it already and aligning yourself with them, getting close with them, I think is big. I think getting inside of a community of people that are actually doing what you want to do is really important. I've always thought that, peer pressure, we kind of grow up with peer pressure as having a negative connotation, but it can work both ways. You hang around, troublemakers, and you're probably going to get into trouble. you hang around successful people, you're gonna be compelled to succeed as well, or else you're not gonna belong in that group either.
Yeah.
So I think being intentional about creating your environment is really big. So I would say education, environment, and then just kind of take action off of the information that you consumed, and access the resources that you can, and utilize the resources and the help and the guidance from the environment that you created. I think that's a great starting point.
No, I agree, and it's and what's great about today, because it sounds like you were doing some of this maybe before. Well, I don't know, because you talked about doing Google, but I mean, the bottom line is there's so much at our fingertips today relating to knowledge, and so much of it is free that you can get far enough that you can figure out whether or not it's something you'd be interested at all without dropping a dime in terms of paying for courses or any of these other things. There's so much out there that it's a great resource for folks who really need to try to figure out their next step.
For sure. I mean, anytime you need to know how to do something, just go to YouTube and type "how to."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break for a second. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Matt, so don't go away. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right. Aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Welcome back, everyone. We're still continuing our chat with Matt Theriault, a real estate investor, obviously in Southern California, since we've been talking about some of the regions down there. Matt, you've given us some great info in terms of when folks started out. One other thing I wanted to hit with you is one thing that a lot of investors seem to get into is the idea of focusing on a niche. Now, are you a guy who does that, or do you look for any opportunity that comes along?
Yeah, it's a good question. That you're right, because there's a lot of wholesalers, or there's fix and flippers, there's storage facility people, there's mobile home people. They got their own little niche.
Right.
So there's no shortage of people out there willing to show you and able to show you how to do deals. But I think where a lot of it falls short is in finding the deal. Because it doesn't matter what niche or strategy you choose, you still have to know how to find the deal, right? You got to buy it low enough so you can make some money on the other side of it. So my niche is really, I like single families. I'm very much a cash flow investor, so I'm not a big fix and flipper. I'm not a wholesaler. I really invest for income. And so that takes me through the Midwest and the South mostly. I really focus on finding the deals on single family residences. Once I have them under contract, then I've got multiple exit strategies on how I can, profit from those, either chunks of cash or streams of cash flow, or a little combination of both.
So what draws you to single family residentials? I know that in my case, when I actually just do the math, multi-units tend to make more math sense, but on a management basis and on a headache basis, from a lot of investors I've worked with, single family residentials are the way to go. Where do you come down on that?
Yeah. I think I'm probably very much in alignment with you. I just dumped my last two multifamilies. I learned some really valuable and expensive lessons from those two properties. Right. But I learned a lot, and it's not that I won't go back again, but it was necessary for a reset because I had just messed that up so badly. The thinking that, hey, I own 100 single families, what's 44 units in an apartment building? It's just 44 houses underneath one roof is what I was thinking that transition was going to be. Right. And you're right, management comes into play, and it really is kind of a different beast. It's like a business within a business almost. Yeah. So I'm drawn to single family just because it's simple. It's a simple concept. You buy a house and someone needs to pay you for the right to live in it, and that's just a good working relationship between myself and a tenant. And so it's just simple. It's easy. Yeah. And, from the standpoint, and again, we're kind of
we're preaching to one another here in terms of being in the same choir. But when you do the math on it, it all makes sense in terms of month to month without realizing that it's not. The level of difficulty is potentially heightened, right? The amount of time you potentially have to spend is heightened. That goes further than just you're now managing 10 units, right? If it was one unit, simply one single family residential multiplied by 10, that's kind of what you're thinking in your head, but it's not. It's actually more than that. But the other side of it is when you decide to exit, let's say you decide to have a liquidation happen in one market because you want to move into another market. Single family residentials are a lot easier to liquidate than multi-units for the most part. And the potential pool of buyers is bigger. So you end up finding yourself in a position, at least with investors I've worked with, that's been one of their major things. When they finally settle on single family residential, it's that slightly elevated level of financial mobility that they can have with their investment in terms of being able to get rid of it more quickly and then move on to another marketplace. Has that been true in your experience?
I would say for the most part, you're right. The market is pretty hot right now in multifamily. When I put my 2 buildings on the market earlier this year, like I had more phone calls for those than I've ever had for anything I've ever put on the market. Yeah. And so the demand is really high, but I think in general, like in a normal market, I think we're just a little bit of a, I don't know, an anomaly right now, or just we've hit a peak where real estate is so hot, everybody's trying to get everything. Yeah. But I think generally speaking, you are accurate.
Yeah. See, I'm up in Silicon Valley, so it's nuts up here.
Single families up there for sure.
Yeah. Right. And interesting. You mentioned where you invest. You mentioned the South and the Midwest. What are areas that you think are good places for first-time investors to kind of turn their gaze if they're looking for that first investment?
Yeah, no, I think people that fix and flip, I don't really consider them investors. Right, I consider them almost as traders. Yeah. If you're going to invest, I mean that's a hold position, and so if you're going to hold, you want that property to actually pay you while you're holding it, and to be able to do that really in anywhere in Southern California or New York or anywhere like in the Northeast or even in the more affluent areas of Florida, it's almost impossible to get something to positively cash flow. If you're going to invest there, you're investing for other reasons than cash flow. Right. So if you go to the Midwest and the South, people in Silicon Valley might be totally shocked that there are houses there that you can buy for $50,000 that rent for $750 a month. Right. And when I discovered that, because I'm born and raised in Southern California, 5th generation, I've never been outside of the state until I was probably my mid-20s, just back and forth to New York in the music business, but I would never stop anywhere in between. And when I discovered that, I was like, wow, this is like, 15%, 20%, just cash on cash returns, just from the cash flow, not counting, the other profit centers of real estate. And so that really attracted me to the Midwest and the South. And if that's anyone's aspiration, it's a low entry point. There's low risk. And like, again, it's really simple to do. Yeah.
Well, it's ironic because I'll talk to people who will say, wow, I wish I could get into that Bay Area market. And it may sound sexy. It may be the market that grabs the headlines, but in terms of return on investment, no is the answer. Right. Mm-hmm. In fact, when you look at all the reports that come out from all the various outlets, whether it's Home Union or whoever else is putting out the latest research, places like where we live have the lowest return on investment. They rank way down at number 100, whereas places like Memphis and Atlanta and Austin and what was the one that surprised me? Was it Charlotte, North Carolina, I think was on the list most recently. Different areas that have ridiculous return on investment. And then imagine being able to take that $1 million California property and turning it into 6 properties in Charlotte where you're making way more return per dollar spent. And now you've got a diversified portfolio, right? So if one isn't being rented, it doesn't affect 100% of your income. You've now got, most of your properties making money for you.
For sure. And to take it a step further, I mean, you go and buy those 6 houses and they're cash flowing and they pay for your rent in a house that you couldn't afford in Silicon Valley.
Right. Exactly right.
You get all the benefits of owning real estate and you get a nicer lifestyle on the lower price tag.
Yeah. And given tax changes that are coming down the pike, who knows what kind of things might make sense for you in terms of not owning what you live in, but only owning what you rent to people. I've got a few investors who sort of invested their life in that theory at this point, and they seem pretty happy as well.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. What do you see in terms of the real estate market in general? And are there any markets that you're particularly excited about that you think are likely to boom over the next few years?
Yeah. As far as the future, I don't know if I'm the best source of predictions. I don't do a lot of research on that type of stuff. Okay. What I have noticed, though, is, because we have a turnkey operation where a lot of busy professionals come to us to buy these income properties in the Midwest and the South. So we're able to leverage our teams and allow other people to use those. And so that's kind of my biggest connection to like a general public real estate environment. Mm-hmm. And so that we deal with the banks and we do financing and we deal with the appraisals and all that type of stuff we typically don't deal with in our investment side. But what I've seen is that the amount of hoops that buyers are still having to jump through just to get qualified for their loans and how rigorous the appraisal process still is. Over the last, 8-9 years, I think banks have written like the best book of business they've ever written. So with that in mind, if there's a crash or a bubble, it's not going to be from what has happened in the past, I don't think. Mm-hmm. I think if there's anything there, it's something underneath that we're not even aware. Just, if we look in hindsight back in 2007, 2008, it's crystal clear that secondary market and there's a third market and all that stuff that was going on there. Yep. But we had no idea that was going on in 2007. I mean, the general real estate community. Right. We didn't know anything about a secondary market and how that worked. So I think if we have a bubble or any sort of crash, there's something going on right now that we aren't privy to. Yeah. But I don't think it's going to be from anything that's traditionally caused real estate to ebb and flow in the past.
Yeah. I mean, usually for me, whenever I look at the causes of the downturn last time, so much of it was focused on real estate related stuff, right? The core problem was, subprime lending and, no doc loans and this belief that real estate could only go up, right? And so much of what facilitated the crash was real estate centric. And I think I agree that if when we see another downturn, at least the next one isn't going to be real estate centric. It's going to be some other financial element that kind of pushes those dominoes. I do think there's things in the real estate world, like we've done a lot of weird stuff in terms of tweaking how you qualify. I mean, when we made the mistakes before, it was about just being okay with no docs, saying, hey, no docs, fine, great.
Right.
This time we've played with it on the other side of the equation where we've sort of dumbed down what a credit rating is, right? And we've made it a lot easier to score a higher rating by not counting deficiencies in your credit or counting things in your credit that never used to be counted to give it a boost. That kind of stuff has been going on in terms of facilitating more lending. But yeah, no, I tend to agree that's going to be something else. It's going to be pensions not getting funded, or it's going to be printing too much money and causing inflation. It's going to be something outside of real estate necessarily that's going to really cause havoc for us. Now, you just kind of touched on it a little bit, but you offer services to folks out there in the world to help them find properties. Do you want to give the folks a little insight into that?
Sure. Yeah. There's a big portion of the population. Like when I said that I went out to California or to Memphis and found out that they had $50,000, $75,000 houses out there that rent for 1.5% of that purchase price. Mm-hmm. I was blown away. And when I brought that news back to my network in California, they were blown away as well. So it kind of accidentally turned into a business where, hey, Matt, you got the team out there. Can you go out and just pick up a few of these for me too? And so we were doing what it's called turnkey real estate investing now. We didn't know what it was called when we were doing it, right, when we started. But we go out and we leverage our teams and our resources that are on the ground in these various markets. We're in 12 different markets in the Midwest and the South. We'll go out and find the distressed property. We'll purchase it. We'll fix it up. We'll put a tenant in place. We'll coordinate the property management, and then we sell it as a cash-producing asset. And so that's our typical client is it's very cliche. Here we are on cliches again. Yeah. Doctors and lawyers, and we have a lot of medical device salespeople, pharmaceutical salespeople, small business owners. People that make good incomes and have a lot of cash, but just don't have the time to go out and put it to work for themselves.
Right.
So that's what we do out there. And like I said, that was kind of an accidental business, but here we are 8 years later going strong, and that's a big portion of what we do now.
And if folks wanted to reach out to you, get more in contact with you relating to that, or maybe checking out you on your podcast, which is up on iTunes, what would be the best place for them to go?
Sure. So if what we just talked about right there is appealing, it's at cashflowsavvy.com, cashflowsavvy.com. That is our turnkey operation. Or if you just want to tune in and see what we talk about each and every week, more on a real estate investing side and on the ground and in the streets and in the trenches, that's it. Our podcast is epicrealestateinvesting.com. If you type in that domain name, it'll take you right to the link in iTunes.
Perfect. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you taking so much of your valuable time with us. It's been great, and I look forward to checking in with you in the future and see what more is going on in business.
Perfect. Thanks, Robert. It was a pleasure.
You bet. Have a good one.
You too.